Big story tonight, a two-day conference on a global election system began at the Sakana Hotel in Nairobi with senior legislators, among them Senate Majority Leader Kipchumba Murkomen and his minority counterpart James Orengo being in attendance. The theme of the summit is rethinking democracy as it seeks to enhance democracy through free and fair elections. The irony, however, is that Kenya's parliament has failed to institute a process to reinvigorate the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. 1 year on since commissioners began resigning, the agency that had 7 commissioners has just 3 commissioners. And in October this year, Ezra Chilobo was fired as IEBC CEO, further leaving the ailing commission in an even more precarious situation. But both the executive and parliament seem to show little or no effort to restructure the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Well, in studio for more on this conversation, 2 elections experts, Marcus Agenga, as well as lawyer Felix Odhiambo. Many thanks for joining us on the show, gentlemen. Marcus, let me come back to you. From the nullification of the presidential election results last year to eroding public confidence, claims of corruption and resignation of half the commission, there is no doubt that IEBC needs to undergo reforms to fix its changes. But the chairman, Ofila Chebukati, says IEBC is already shopping for an international firm to lead the reform process. Is this a mature decision coming from the electoral body itself?
I think there is need for the IEBC to be reformed. I'm not very sure whether we need an international body to lead the reform. Now, a number of institutions are required to help in the reform period. Some of the challenges that are facing IEBC are legal and policy in nature. So that means that, again, we go back to Parliament, of course, to ensure that legal infrastructure is put in place to ensure that we have a functional electoral management body. Some of the challenges that IEBC is experiencing are integrity related. So now if you want to bring someone from outside to help us reform, while we know that the issue is about integrity, that will be probably, I mean, it's not clear to me how that will help. Now, I think for us, I mean, from where I sit, there is need for us to reform IEBC and all other electoral management institutions, but we need to agree on the how. So that one of the things that we need to do is to engage a number of institutions, because IEBC does not work in isolation. Take, for example, the issue of voter registration. Now, for you to register a voter, there are some of the things that are required. One of them is to have a national ID or a passport, for example. Now, if the body that is mandated to issue IDs is not doing its job, then IEBC is set to fail. So even as ILOG, we conducted an audit of the voters register, and we noticed a number of anomalies, which then made IEBC to have to ensure, I mean, the voters register that we used in 2017 election had errors, and some of the errors were not really because of IEBC's problem, but because of other institutions. So there's need for us to engage the institutions, the electoral institutions, even when we want to reform IEBC. Yes.
Felix, and perhaps just in agreement with Marcus, agreeing on the why we need to reform the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission would make it easier then to agree on the how of bringing electoral reforms in the country. How specifically, or what reforms specifically in terms of legislature should Parliament push for?
First of all, there is need to reform the organizational structure of IEBC. I think that is long overdue. Some steps have begun already, including the audit the internal audit that was commissioned by IEBC itself, the commission chairman, that revealed serious problems. Now, the decision of the Supreme Court that you referred to that nullified the 2017 presidential election was clear that the election was nullified on the basis of illegalities and irregularities and the manner in which the results were transmitted. And I looked at the country, various people from commentators and politicians and political parties that no, the Supreme Court did not name people by name. That was besides the point. The minute the Supreme Court made that decision, the buck effectively stopped with the Secretariat, the CEO, first of all, and the specific departments that committed those irregularities and illegalities. And for that reason alone, there is a need to reorganize the organizational structure of IEBC, and I agree with Marcus, it is not the domain of an international firm to do that. I think there is sufficient expertise in this country to do that. Now, but very quickly on other reforms, I think it has to be appreciated that there are far more fundamental reforms and far more problems in our electoral cycle that goes beyond the personnel. Number one is the voter register that Marcus has made reference to. If you look at the voter register, there comparatively across the world, a voter register must meet 3 tests. Number one, is it comprehensive? Number two, is it authoritative? And number 3, is it accurate and verifiable? If you look at 2007 election, 2013 election, and 2017 election, even with the introduction of biometrics, the voter register does not meet this test. And yes, there is a need to align the voter registration process, which is done by IEBC, by the civil registry, which is done by other bodies. This is exactly what South Africa does. The other reform, of course, has to do with political parties. There is need to look at the institutional structure of political parties with a view to institutionalizing them. Look at the party nominations that we had last year. Now, one of the unique features of the 2017-2022 electoral cycle is that we will have every major phases of that cycle, including potentially boundaries delimitation. Now, this country has not put in sufficient policy and legal framework to look at how are we going to review our boundaries, the second review after the first review of 2012. And of course, the other major fundamental reform that we must fix is what I call results management. What happens when a voter casts his ballot and the results are declared? You remember in 2007, 2013, and 2017, and one of the bases of even invalidation of the last presidential election results is that results came from nowhere. Even IEBC could not vouch for those results. The IEBC lawyer referred to those results as statistics, meaning even with technology, we are yet to find a way of reforming our results management system. That is the elephant in the room. Yes.
All right. Let me bring in what you've said is quite interesting and goes along with what our Wafula Chebukati has been speaking about here. And he downplays, of course, he's been putting on quite a brave face over the composition of the commission after 4 out of these 7 commissioners resigned. And he says that steps have been taken to address the challenges that affected the preparations for the last general election. He goes ahead to say there's no quorum hitch within IEBC because the Constitution allows for there to have 3 commissioners there. But many question the fact that we want Parliament to be at the forefront of championing for electoral reforms because it is the same politicians who have attacked the IEBC from left, right and centre over the procurement of electoral materials. The opposition saying several contracts were given to companies already having been suspected of rigging in other countries. Is the political class at this time the best to champion election reforms in the country? Yes. Marcus.
I think to answer the question directly, I think the political class, in consultation with key stakeholders, should champion reforms. And I think it's very easy as a country to look at IEBC and speak about its failures, but no one is looking at Parliament and its fundamental failures that has also contributed to the systematic failure we see in IEBC. First, we bring in new commissioners 8 months to an election and still expect them to deliver. Number 2, we introduce late amendments to the electoral legal framework very close to the election and still expect IEBC to meet its operational obligations. The politicians, which Felix talked about, the political party processes in Kenya, they are run by politicians. Look at how they conduct their own party elections, and still we expect IEBC to do a good job. I think some of the things that we need, I think Parliament is a key stakeholder that must look into itself and see how is it contributing to failure or success of a free, fair, and credible election in the country.
Right.
In my view, Parliament must wake up, rise to the occasion, and make good use of this post-election period where we are sober, and so that we can have these conversations going on and starting off in a very good way.
All right, and Felix, of course, it's a multi-sectoral approach when it comes to securing elections in the country. IEBC will now have to work with KRA as well as the DPP. But let's talk about these other institutions that we're talking about and the integrity, so to speak, because the issue of vetting senior staff members of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission has been on the table since the interim Independent and Boundaries Commission, and that seems not to have worked because we're still talking about integrity issues from individuals who are at the helm of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission?
I mean, first of all, I think the IEBC should have moved with speed to conduct the vetting of IEBC staff. They are heads of departments and who have been there since the IIC. In 2010, and have since been there holding those dockets, positions in the same dockets for 8 to 10 years as we speak. I mean, even in international practice, international diplomacy, the only reason why we shuffle our diplomats every now and then and transfer them from one country to another after 4 to 5 years is because of the need to have a fresh start and reinvigorate the various departments. So vetting is necessary. But even having said that, there are very good people at the commission who unfortunately have not worked with some of them, who unfortunately are tainted by the others. So vetting is critical, vetting is a must, and it has, we need to move with speed. But there is something that you made reference to, which I think the interagency involvement in the electoral process, KRA, Parliament, and the police and things like that. I think we also need to interrogate, based on the 2017 election, the extent of what I call state capture and the deep state involvement in the electoral process. If you look at some of the failures of IEBC, as Marcus has articulated, the involvement of the state, the deep state, the price of winning elections, the stakes are so much that shadowy elements and cartel ensures that the IEBC is probably one of the most captured and manipulated and interfered with agency probably across the continent. So we really need to, the legal and policy framework would have to look at, if we are to, questions of delinking or dealing with state capture. But finally, is on the implication and the impact of integrity issues that you made reference to. Michelle, if you look at the cost of elections in this country, arising as a result of the integrity and corruption, right now in 2017 elections alone, according to the Auditor General's report, 9.5 billion shillings was misappropriated.
Right.
And according to the internal report instituted by the Commission chairman, 4.5 billion shillings was lost. Now, the cost of a ballot per voter in Kenya is 2,700 shillings. The cost of the ballot per voter in Ghana is 97 shillings. In Kenya is 2,700, in Accra, in Ghana is 97. In the United States is $1 per voter. Now, why would America incur less cost in election, and Kenya incurs almost, $27 per voter in every election? Part of the reason is because when we do a budget for elections, then as evidence in the Auditor General's report and the internal audit report commissioned by IEBC, almost half of it is wasted. raising fundamental integrity questions.
All right. Marcus, even as we wind up, the Election Observation Group has been quite active in monitoring elections across the years in the country. What specific electoral reforms must be championed by Parliament in the wake of the 2022 elections?
I mean, there are a number of reforms that we have suggested, and among them is first, to clearly stipulate when the commissioners should get into office. They should get into office in a timely manner to avoid what we are seeing. To avoid, let them blend, know the systems, learn the culture of the commission. In terms of even the voter registration, we have suggested that we need to have a system that complements, that works together. IBC working closely with the civil registry so we can have a good register of voters, because it is the basis upon which a credible election rely. We have also suggested that there is need to institutionalize political party processes in Kenya, because they are a major player in the electoral process. So there are a number of reforms that we have suggested. And the other reform that we have suggested is that there is need for the country to respect independent institutions like IBC, for example. As far as I said, IBC is one of the most captured institutions in the country. Yet we speak about independent electoral and boundaries commission. Independent. So we need to respect, as a country, we need to move the discussion in how we want to respect the independent nature of these commissions. And also, there is need for us as a country to review our electoral system. Because as it is now, the winner takes it all. So that I think there's need for us to review that system. Do we want to have a model that allows every vote to count? Do we want to have a mixed system like they have been proposing today? So we need to have that, because we keep on fighting because, you see, this community is being sidelined, this political party is being sidelined.
Right.
So we need to have that conversation. And also the Article 81B.
Okay.
About the gender parity.
All right. Gentlemen, our time is up. Many thanks for speaking to us. Election experts, Marcus Agenga and Felix Ondiambo.